Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Friedemann, and if you want to find out more about the work I'm offering and how it can help you to overcome fear and anxiety at a deep subconscious root level, and therefore find also a greater sense of your own power and find that you can build a stronger foundation of confidence, inner peace, and ability just to live more from your true authentic self, go to my website, thefearandanxietysolution.com. There you can find my programs, the book, the individual session information, all the things you may want to know on how to finally get out of the grip of anxiety that may have held you back for such a long time. Now, before the break, we talked about women and anxiety and how the history of suppression and violence has something to do with why women, maybe even historically, feel more anxious. And it's really interesting when you think about it. 50% of our world population are women, and theoretically, women could do fine without men. I mean, women could propagate and have children without men. Science allows all of those things these days. Men couldn't really survive without women, but somehow who is in charge and somehow who is still treating women as less than. And this is something that Judy from Portland writes. She says, why women are anxious? Sexism, sexism, sexism. Women and men need to be clear that sexism is a real and systematic oppression. It is present and it's continuing, and it's strong despite the gains that have been made in some places. Women, especially in younger generations, need to know the term sexism and understand it. It's not a thing of the past and goes way beyond gender inequalities. They also need to understand how women internalize sexism inside themselves, start believing that the sexist lies that have been aimed their way, and then act against their own best interest. And I think Judy makes a really good point. I mean, there is a general, I think, confusion also of the role of women and men in general that creates anxiety and that creates a sense of pressure in women, that maybe a pressure to please, a pressure to perform, a pressure to compete, and all of those things can create more anxiety. So thank you, Judy, for this remark. Now, besides the violence and besides the sexism, there is also just the day-to-day pressure. The day-to-day pressure in life that for many women is creating this sense of stress and overwhelm. Many women are basically trying to fulfill a dual role in life. There is the role of having to make money, to make ends meet. Many couples just realize that life is so expensive, especially in big cities, that both have to work. But as soon as they come home, they also have to fulfill the role of the housekeeper, the role of the mother, the role of the cook, the cleaner, and all those things. And men have so far, statistics shows it, and clients tell me about it, they don't really have so far really stepped up to help their spouses. And again, I'm not generalizing, but we have to see that these traditional roles, even though women are asked to do more, especially when it comes to having a career and having to make money, that these traditional roles are still somehow ingrained. And that easily creates a sense of overwhelm and a sense of just feeling, no matter where you're in and what you do, no matter what role you're stepping in, you don't really feel you ever have done a good enough job. And this is one of the complaints I often hear from my clients, that they feel they are not a good enough mother, they cannot really measure up at work, they cannot really be someone who keeps the house in the order they think they should, and so on and so on. Now, at work, one of the pressures, which again, I mentioned before, there is certainly also this sense of being, maybe looked down upon, or not really being represented well, or having a lesser salary than the colleagues. But then there's also the pressure that a lot of women tell me that they feel they have to somehow work harder and be more perfect than their male counterparts in order to be able to compete. It's almost like as if just being a woman is already, a strike against you. And so they feel that pressure. And once they do feel they have actually established a sense of maybe respect or success, there is this common imposter syndrome, which makes women feel as if, well, somehow I'm going to be found out. Somehow this cannot be true, that I'm really that successful. People will eventually question and doubt me. And that again creates a lot of fear and anxiety of ultimately losing or failing and being judged and criticized. Speaking about judgment and criticism, there's also this enormous expectation on how a woman is supposed to be and to look like and to appear like. I mean, the media starts already early to just tell our teenagers, even the children, that there are certain things you have to do and certain clothes you have to wear and certain looks you have to have, and this just continues on. There is this external expectation, and if you don't really comply to that expectation, as a woman especially, you feel not good enough, you feel not fitting in, and that once again creates pressure, especially in a society that is quite youth obsessed. A lot of the women that I talked about this a few weeks ago are also afraid and anxious about aging, because they feel that as soon as they're hitting 50, they're starting to become invisible. They are starting to become irrelevant, and they do almost feel like, well, they don't exist any longer because nobody really pays attention. And that is something that Susie actually writes from the UK. She says that in addition to what you just said, I'd like to suggest that perhaps one of the reasons older women suffer from anxiety is that statistically they are more likely than men to end up living alone and in financial difficulties. If you visit care homes, they are far more heavily populated by women than men, and often their retirement income is less than their male counterparts. Loneliness and social isolation and a lack of funds to help redress these issues can give rise to negative cycles of feeling vulnerable and anxious. And I think you're absolutely right, Susie, that this is also a part of our society that is easily overlooked and struggling so much with that sense of hopelessness and anxiety and maybe that day-to-day stress to, not know how they may be able to afford things, and that loneliness and not feeling that support from the outside. It's almost as if there is a part of our society pushed aside and forgotten. And again, this is up to us to make changes in this regard. Now, it's one thing to be aware of the anxiety, and I'm sure there are other aspects that I haven't talked about that create anxiety about in women, and there may be other just pressures, expectations, beliefs that cause this anxiety. But there is one thing about looking at the problem, and maybe because I'm male, what's the solution? What can we do? And I believe that there are things we can do. Of course, this radio show cannot fix the anxiety epidemic, especially among women. But what I would like to talk about in the next segment is just certain things that you, as a man or a woman, can already start practicing and doing right now to shift out of the survival mode of anxiety and start really creating a greater sense of harmony and balance in your home, in your environment, in your family. So stay tuned. We will talk more about this when I'm back.